pulled this quote out from the chapter March 13th, Hepatica, because of our love for herbs and plants. I thought this was such a great little tidbit. He says, the tension between the medical establishment and the quacks continues, of course. The astrological doctrine of signatures now finds itself out of favor. Our physicians no longer believe that God left providential medicinal hints in the shapes of leaves and the arrangement of stars. We should not, however, be too quick to dismiss the doctrine of signatures as trifling superstition. As a method of cultural transmission of medical knowledge, the doctrine was a powerful organizing device, richer and perhaps more coherent than the mnemonics used by modern physicians to navigate their large drawers of knowledge. The method gave healers, most of whom couldn't read, linguistic cues to connect patient symptoms with the sometimes arcane details of botanical identification and medical knowledge. The doctrine of signatures persisted for so many years, not because our ancestors were simple-minded, but because it was so useful. And I thought that was just such a good treatment of that thought. He wasn't going to go like, well, I'm a scientist and they were superstitious Neanderthals, it's like, no, sometimes there's a reason these things stick around. It might not be relevant to medical science per se, but it doesn't mean it didn't have a relevancy.
It's like the thing works no matter what, because it's something about the world and how it works and science, this thing we call science. So it doesn't matter if you don't understand it or if you think it works, because if the reason you think it works is because of a different thing.
Right.
But
yeah.
It still works. And I think that's the most important, I guess.
He said, reflecting more on that same plant that he was observing in his mandala hoop, Hepatica's name reveals our culture's propensity for naming plants after their uses. This method of naming helps us remember humanity's dependence on plants for medicines and foods. But utilitarian names can also stand in the way of a full experience of nature. For example, our nomenclature has its teleology wrong. Hepatica exists not to serve us, but to live its own story, one that began in the forests of Europe and North America, millions of years before humans even came to be. Likewise, our naming imposes tidy categories on nature. These may not reflect life's complicated genealogies and reproductive exchanges. Modern genetics suggests that boundaries in nature are often more permeable than we suppose when we give things the names of separate species. On this bright morning in the early spring, Hepatica's confident welcome of the first warm sun and flying bees reminds me that the mandala exists independent of human doctrines. Like all people, I am culture-bound, so I only see the flower. The rest of my field of vision is occupied by centuries of human words.
So we don't know what the flower calls itself. We don't know what the hepatica calls itself. Something like that, right?
Yeah, I just thought that was a very nicely poetic way of him basically saying, like, oh, we humans, we like to think we know everything, but really this thing was here long before us and could possibly go on long after us. Like, what do we know?
What do we do?
All relative.